You ever have one of those days where everything goes wrong? You wake up late. You spill coffee on your shirt. Your phone dies. And you think, okay, today is just not my day. Now imagine that feeling. But the stakes are, everyone you know dies if you lose. 5 times in history, armies showed up to a battle where the math made 0 sense. Where every general, every strategist, every person with a brain and a map looked at the situation and said, yeah, these guys are cooked. And then something happened. Something that had no right to happen. And the side that was supposed to lose didn't. 5 battles. 5 impossible outcomes. And I promise you, by the time we hit number 1, you are going to want to stand up and cheer for people who have been dead for centuries. I'm not even joking. Number 1 did something so unhinged, so beautiful, so completely insane that military schools still teach it today as a lesson in what is actually possible.
Welcome to Historia.
Let's get into it. For 80 BC, Persia. King Xerxes has assembled what is, and historians actually debate this, but the low estimate is still absolutely terrifying. Somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 soldiers. The largest army the ancient world had ever seen. Ships, cavalry, infantry,
elephants.
The whole package. And he is marching directly toward Greece. Greece, for context, is a collection of city-states that spend most of their time arguing with each other. They are not unified. They are not organized. And they are very much not prepared for what is coming. The Greek response, and I want you to appreciate how genuinely unhinged this was to send 300 Spartans. 300 against 100,000. The math on that is not good. That is a ratio so bad that your calculator would just start crying. But here is the thing about the 300 Spartans and their commander Leonidas that the movie kind of glossed over. They weren't just tough. They were smart. The Hot Gates, Thermopylae, is a mountain pass so narrow that at its tightest point it is about 15 meters wide. 15 meters. That is roughly the width of a suburban driveway times 5. In that space, Xerxes' 100,000 soldiers were completely irrelevant. He could only send so many men at once. And the Spartans, trained literally from birth to fight in exactly this kind of tight formation, held that driveway for 3 days. 3 days. Against the largest army in the world. Every wave Persia sent, the Spartans rotated fresh fighters to the front, let the pass do the work, and sent the Persians back in body bags. Now here is the part that does not get talked about enough. Leonidas knew from the start he was not going to survive this. This was not a rescue mission. This was a delay tactic. He held that pass long enough for the rest of Greece to organize, for the Athenian fleet to get into position, for the real defense to set up. The 300 lost in the end. They were betrayed by a local who showed Persia a path around the pass. Every single one of them died. But Greece didn't fall, because 300 people held a driveway for 3 days and bought their civilization enough time to survive. That's not a loss. That is the most successful defeat in human history. But if Thermopylae is the most successful defeat, the next one on our list is the battle where a bunch of farmers embarrassed the most powerful professional army on earth. And they did it in a field, with sticks. A bunch of farmers, against the most powerful professional army on earth. The French cavalry charges, into the mud, in full plate armor. The plate armor that was supposed to protect them became the problem. Knights in full plate, falling in mud, cannot get up by themselves. The French lost somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 men. The English lost approximately 450. Henry V went home and Shakespeare wrote a play about him. But Agincourt was won by preparation and smart positioning. The next battle on our list was won by winter, and patience, and the willingness to make an entire city disappear. October 25, 1415, northern France. Henry V of England has about 6,000 soldiers. He's been marching for weeks. His men are exhausted, underfed, and a significant portion of them, and this is not a metaphor, have dysentery. That is the medieval word for a digestive situation that makes everything worse. Waiting for him is the French army. somewhere between 12,000 and 36,000 soldiers, depending on which historian you ask. Fresh, well-fed, in full plate armor, on horseback, on their own home turf. The French knights are so confident that they are literally arguing about who gets to capture the English king first. They have brought their personal heralds so that there will be official witnesses to their individual acts of glory. They have packed extra chains for prisoners. This is not humility. This is a team that has already planned the victory parade before the game has started. Henry V looks at this situation and does something nobody expected. He picks the most inconvenient possible battlefield. There has been heavy rain. The field between the two armies is a freshly plowed muddy mess. Henry positions his small, exhausted army between two dense forests so the French cannot flank him. Then he plants 6,000 wooden stakes in the ground pointing outward toward the French cavalry. Then he sends his longbowmen to work. The French cavalry charges into the mud, in full plate armor, on horses that are also in the mud, towards 6,000 wooden stakes, while 6,000 arrows per minute are raining down on them from the sides. The plate armor that was supposed to protect them became the problem. Knights in full plate falling in mud cannot get up by themselves. The mud was so thick that men were literally drowning in it. The French rear ranks pushing forward had nowhere to go because the front ranks were jammed up against each other and the stakes and the mud and the arrows. The most heavily armored professional cavalry force in Europe was defeated in about 3 hours by tired men with stomach problems and really good aim. The French lost somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 men. The English lost approximately 450. 450 versus 10,000. Henry V went home and William Shakespeare wrote a play about him. The French do not have a play about Agincourt. I wonder why, but Agincourt was won by preparation and smart positioning. The next battle on our list was won by something that nobody would have chosen as a military strategy. It was won by winter, and patience, and the willingness to make an entire city disappear. August 1942, the Soviet Union. Nazi Germany has been on the most terrifying winning streak in modern military history. They have rolled through France in 6 weeks. They have pushed deep into Soviet territory. They have not lost a major engagement in 2 years. Hitler decides he wants Stalingrad. Not just for strategic reasons, though there are those, but because it is named after Stalin. Taking it would be a massive psychological blow. It is personal. The German Sixth Army, one of the most battle-hardened and well-equipped forces in history, arrives at Stalingrad in August 1942. Stalingrad is a city of about 500,000 people running along the western bank of the Volga River. The initial German assault is devastating. By November, they control 90% of the city. 90%. Soviet soldiers are holding individual buildings, individual floors of buildings, individual rooms of buildings. There are documented cases of the front line running through the middle of a factory, Germans on one side, Soviets on the other, both using the same machinery as cover. Every military analyst watching this situation is writing the obituary for Soviet resistance in Stalingrad. And then Soviet General Georgy Zhukov does something that nobody in the German high command saw coming because it was almost too obvious to consider. He stops trying to win Stalingrad. Instead, he looks at the map. The German Sixth Army is deep inside the city. Its flanks on both sides are being held by Romanian and Hungarian armies, German allies, but not nearly as well equipped or motivated as the Germans themselves. And it is November. In Russia, Operation Uranus launches on November 19th. Soviet forces attack not into the city but around it, hitting those weaker flank armies simultaneously from the north and the south. Within 4 days, the German Sixth Army of 300,000 men is completely encircled, cut off.
No supplies, no reinforcements.
In a Russian winter that hits minus 30 degrees Celsius, Hitler orders them to hold. He promises an air supply operation that never materializes at the scale he promises a relief force that gets stopped. On February 2nd, 1943, what was left of the German Sixth Army, about 91,000 men, surrendered. Of those 91,000, only about 6,000 ever made it home. The rest died in captivity. Stalingrad is considered the turning point of World War II. The moment the war stopped going in one direction and started going in the other. Germany went from 90% of the city to surrendering 300,000 men in 90 days. Because one general stopped looking at the battle everyone was watching and looked at the battle nobody was paying attention to. But Stalingrad took months. The next one on our list took a single afternoon. And it happened because one man made a decision that every textbook in the world said was wrong. (216 BC), southern Italy. Hannibal Barca of Carthage has done something that was considered flatly impossible. He has marched an army, including war elephants, over the Alps in winter. People have been saying for 2,000 years that this was insane, and they are correct, it was insane, and he did it anyway. By the time he reaches Italy, he has already beaten 2 Roman armies. Rome is scared. Rome is also, and this is the important part, very, very angry. Rome assembles the largest army it has ever fielded. 86,000 soldiers. 2 consuls commanding. The plan is overwhelming force. We outnumber him almost 2 to 1. We march straight at him. We crush him with numbers. Simple. Hannibal has 50,000 men. Here is what Hannibal does at Cannae that military academies still teach as possibly the greatest tactical achievement in human history. He puts his weakest troops, Gauls and Spanish infantry, at the center of his line. His best troops, his African veterans, he puts on the wings. Then he deliberately allows the center to bend backward. Rome sees the center bending and does exactly what Rome always does. It pushes harder at the center. More troops forward. Press the advantage. The center is breaking, pour everything in. 86,000 Roman soldiers pushing into a center that keeps bending backward. Getting tighter. Getting more compressed. Until 86,000 men are essentially standing on each other in a mass so dense they can barely lift their weapons. Then Hannibal's African veterans on the wings pivot inward. The Roman army is completely surrounded, encircled. The largest army Rome had ever assembled is standing packed together so tightly that soldiers are dying not from weapons but from suffocation and trampling. In a single afternoon, somewhere between 50,000 and 70,000 Romans die. It is the single deadliest day for a Western army until World War I. The killing field is so saturated that ancient writers describe being able to walk across the battlefield without touching the ground. Hannibal destroys the largest Roman army ever assembled with a smaller force. On purpose, by making them think they were winning. Every military double envelopment in history since Cannae, from the Civil War to World War II, is directly descended from what Hannibal did in that field in 216 BC. He didn't just win a battle. He invented a move that the entire world has been copying for 2,200 years. But Cannae required genius, preparation, years of strategy. Number 1 on our list required none of that. Number 1 was won in a single night, by surprise, with a force so small it shouldn't even count as an army, against the most powerful empire on Earth. And it changed the entire map of the world. December 26, 1776. New Jersey. The American Revolution is dying. Not slowing down. Not struggling. Dying. The Continental Army has lost New York. It has lost Fort Washington. It has lost Fort Lee. It has been chased across New Jersey by the British like a substitute teacher chasing kids through a Walmart parking lot. George Washington has approximately 2,400 soldiers. Most of them have no shoes. In December, in New Jersey, their enlistments, the contracts that keep them in the army, expire on January 1st. In 6 days. After that, Washington will have almost no army left and the revolution ends. Thomas Paine writes his famous line during this exact period. These are the times that try men's souls. He is not being poetic. He is describing the actual situation. It is genuinely that bad. The British have gone into winter quarters. In the 18th century, armies did not fight in winter. It was too cold, too difficult, supply lines froze, men got sick. Both sides understood this as the basic rule of how war worked. Washington decides to simply not follow that rule. On Christmas night 1776, in a sleet storm, in the dark, Washington loads 2,400 shoeless frozen soldiers into boats and crosses the Delaware River. The river has chunks of ice in it. It is so cold and so dark and so miserable that his chief artillery officer Henry Knox, who is described in every historical account as a very large man, has to physically drag men to the boats because they are too cold and demoralized to move on their own. They are supposed to cross by midnight. They cross by 3 a.m. Then they march 9 miles through a blizzard. At dawn they arrive at Trenton, New Jersey, where a force of Hessian soldiers, German mercenaries fighting for the British, considered among the best professional soldiers in the world, are sleeping off Christmas. The battle lasts approximately 45 minutes. The Hessians lose 22 men killed and 83 wounded. 900 are captured. The Americans lose 0 men killed in combat. 0. 2 soldiers freeze to death on the march. That is the American casualty list. 45 minutes. But here is what makes Trenton number 1 on this list, above Hannibal, above Thermopylae, above all of it. It was not just a battle. It was a country. After Trenton, Washington immediately wins another engagement at Princeton. The Continental Army, which was about to dissolve in 6 days, re-enlists. The revolution that was dying in December 1776 is alive in January 1777. France is watching. France sees that the Americans might actually be able to pull this off and begins the process of supporting the revolution that ultimately tips the war. The United States of America exists in its current form because George Washington decided to cross a frozen river in a blizzard on Christmas night with 2,400 men who had no shoes. Not because the math worked, because he ran out of other options and chose to do the impossible thing instead of the logical thing. And that is the lesson that every single battle on this list teaches, from the Hot Gates to the Delaware River. The math can be wrong. The experts can be wrong. The situation can look completely over. It is not over until it is over. And sometimes not even then. The Hessians never expected an army that had no shoes to cross a frozen river in a blizzard on Christmas night. Washington's gamble. The impossible thing chosen over the logical thing. The revolution lives. Because 2,400 shoeless men crossed a frozen river on Christmas night and changed the entire map of the world. It is not over until it is over. And sometimes not even then. 5 battles. 5 situations where every number said no. A pass held by 300 men. A muddy field that turned armor into an anchor. A general who looked away from the battle everyone was watching. A Carthaginian who invented a move the whole world still copies. And a guy who crossed a frozen river on Christmas because giving up wasn't on the table. Here's what I take from all of this. The people who changed history were not always the ones with the most resources. They were the ones who refused to accept the story everyone else had already decided was over. That is either deeply inspiring or deeply concerning, depending on what you're planning to do with that information. Either way, welcome to Historia, where the past isn't just history, it's a manual. If this one hit different, subscribe, hit the bell. We are just getting started and the next one is already in production. Trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming.